Today we'll be working in my workbook called Opening a Window into the Psalms, Psalms 1 through 21. If this was the first book in the first psalm in the book, I'd be going over these pages, but I don't go over these pages with every psalm in the book. So if you're interested in this, go ahead and stop the video and read it. This is a general study on psalms. This is separating the psalms into groups, the musical nature of the psalms, and these words come up in this book, and then the poetic features of the psalms, which we talk about as we study the psalms. Now, in our psalms, we are doing Psalm 13 right here. So let's go ahead and go to Psalm 13. Psalm 13, how long, Lord? Now, again, the title on Psalm 13 comes from King James or New King James, and it doesn't really come with the psalm itself. It's just easier to have a name to describe these things. But the psalms were originally written without those kind of titles. To the choir master, a psalm of David. So let's go ahead and read the psalm. How long, Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? How long must I wrestle with my thoughts, and day after day have sorrow in my heart? How long will my enemy triumph over me? Look at me and answer, Lord my God. Give light to my eyes, or I will sleep in death. And my enemy will say, I have overcome him. And my foes will rejoice when I fall. But I trust in your unfailing love, and my heart rejoices in your salvation. I will sing the Lord's praise, for he has been good to me. So, with every psalm, I give you some general comments first. And basically, there are as many commentators that will say a different thing as there are psalms, which is quite a number of psalms. So I've just taken a selection to kind of give you a brief idea of what commentators believe, and then we'll go from there. It's part of the first book of Psalms, and that's indisputable. There's about 4 or 5 books of Psalms, and this is the first book. According to the NIV Study Bible, Psalm 13 is grouped in Psalms of 3 and 14, 3 through 14, which are composed of 12 prayers divided into 2 groups of 5, with the 6th, 8 and 14, that characterize the human condition. In the case of Psalm 13, it's a plea for deliverance from serious illness and enemies. According to Jamieson, Fausset, and Brown, Psalm 13 is considered a devotional expressive of sorrow, but with hope. It is definitely a lament psalm, which puts it at the end of David's life. The narrated Bible in chronological order says that Psalm 13 is a psalm of a troubled soul. Thomas Nelson Chronology Bible places this psalm in David's final years, so we can all agree with that. David wrote this psalm to the choir master, which is interchangeable with the chief musician. In David's time, this would either be Asaph, Jeduthun, or Heman. Asaph was a prominent Levite, a worship leader, and a musician in the court. He composed or co-authored several psalms. Jeduthun, also known as Ethan, was also a prominent Levite and musician. Heman, the Ezrahite, was a Levite, seer, songwriter, and musician. He also wrote a psalm. All these were at one time considered the choir master or chief musician. Psalm 13 is divided into 3 sections. The first section is How Long, Lord? Verses 1 through 2. Let's take a look at that. Okay. The second section is Answer or I'll Die, verses 3 and 4. And the last section is Trusting in the Lord's salvation, verses 5 and 6. Notice it is all in future tense. So the first section is How long, Lord, verses 1 through 2. So we're going to move this over so we can see both at the same time. Okay, let's read those again. How long, Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? How long must I wrestle with my thoughts day after day, have sorrow in my heart? How long will my enemy triumph over me? In verses 1 through 2, David starts the psalm with the repetition poetic structure. How many times is the phrase how long used here? 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 times. Okay. Put this back before we move forward. We'll go ahead and move this over for initially. There are 3 types of questions he asks in verse 1 and 2. What do the first 2 how long phrases in verse 1 deal with? How long will you ignore me, Lord? How long will you hide your face from me? What does the first how long of verse 2 deal with? How long do I have to wrestle with my thoughts with sorrow in my heart? What does the last how long of verse 2 deal with? How long will his enemy triumph over him? David basically answers these questions or make parallels to them in the rest of the psalm. Therefore, we will identify these answers or parallels as we get to them. What happened here? That's not what I wanted. Put that back. Okay. What's going on here? I was able to move that before. What's going on here? Not sure why that's not giving me the ability to. Oh, hang on here. This is a first for me. It used to be. Maybe I extended it too long or something. Anyway, we're getting there. Huh. Interesting. Very interesting. Anyway, we'll try to work with this way. Okay. There's 3 types of questions he asks in verse 1 and 2. Oh, and we did that. Next section is answer or I'll die, verses 3 and 4. And I'll go ahead and read those. Look at me and answer, Lord my God. Give light to my eyes, or I will sleep in death. And my enemy will say, I have overcome him. My foes will rejoice when I fall. In the first part of verse 3, David says, look at me and answer, Lord my God. The first part of the verse above, look on me, is a synonymous parallel to the verse prior. What is the prior verse? The prior verse, of course, is verse 2, and it says, look at me and answer, and will you forget, how long will you hide your face from me? Kind of the thing. The second part of verse in 3a, answer, is similar, but not quite parallel. Will you see, the second part in verse in 3a, answer, is similar to the verse prior. What is the prior verse? Okay, we did that. Second part of it, and answer is similar, but not quite parallel. Will you forget me forever? Okay. I guess the second part of 1a, will you forget me forever? Okay. Second part of verse 3 is give light to my eyes, or I will sleep in death. If you think of the first part of 3b as light me, then what is it similar to in verse 2? Give light. Give light to my eyes. Same as wrestling with my thoughts day after day, have sorrow in my heart. Now the balance of 3b goes with verse 4. Give light to my eyes, or I'll sleep in death, and my enemy will say, I have overcome him. And my enemy will say, I have overcome him, and my foes will rejoice when I fall. Okay. I still would love to have that fixed. Okay. That's the problem with doing that. Anyway, sorry. Okay. We can definitely see the balance of verse 3 and verse 4 are similar to what part of verse 4? How long will my enemy triumph over me in verse 2? Notice there is one enemy and more than one foe in verses 2 and 4. Many commentators believe the one enemy is Satan himself. See, one enemy and my foes. Oh, you see, one enemy and foes. In summary, we see the following pleas from David. How long, Lord, will you forget me forever? Answer me, Lord my God. How long will you hide your face from me? Look on me, Lord my God. How long must I wrestle with my thoughts? Day after day, having sorrow in my heart. Give light to my eyes, Lord. How long will my enemy triumph over me? Will I sleep in death and have my enemies say I have overcome him, and my foes will rejoice when I fall? So that's restructuring the psalm to have it make a little sense with the answer and reply. Question and reply, rather. The third section is trusting the Lord and the Lord's salvation, verses 5 and 6. Let's read those. But I trust in your unfailing love. My heart rejoices in your salvation. I will sing the Lord's praise, for he has been good to me. Technically, we know that verse 5 and 6 is an answer to his questions due to the first word of verse 5, which is but. David tells us in verse 5 and 6, but I trust in your unfailing love. My heart rejoices in your salvation. I will sing the Lord's praise, for he has been good to me. How is what David says in verse 5 and 6 an answer to the struggles in verses 1 through 4? His struggles are present, but he also knows that God has always been there for him, and he trusts that God will continue to be there for him. That's how I see it. How the psalm lives on. Psalm 13 is often used by Jews when they pray over a sick person. And that's the end of this psalm. I hope that you enjoyed it and that you'll continue with us in the Psalms. Thank you. Bye now.